The air in the ambulance was always thick with other people's emergencies, a pressurized container of fear and hope. For Leo, after a decade on the job, it was just the smell of another Tuesday night. The stale coffee, the sharp tang of antiseptic wipes, the faint, metallic whisper of blood that never truly washed out of the grooves in the floor. He was riding shotgun, staring out at the rain-slicked streets that blurred and bled into the dark. Sleeping outskirts of the city, his partner Maya was a rock, her hands steady on the wheel, her focus absolute as she navigated the gloom. She was younger than him, but had a preternatural calm that Leo admired and, on nights like this, envied. "Dispatch, this is 7 Adam 16. We are 10-8 returning to station," she said into the radio, her voice calm and professional, cutting through the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers. The response that crackled back was laced with static, the dispatcher's voice unusually strained. 7 Adam 16, negative on return. We have a priority 1 intercept. Patient transfer from Blackwood Memorial. Their transport broke down. You're the closest unit, Leo groaned, leaning towards the mic. Dispatch Blackwood? That's practically in another state, 40 minutes into the sticks. And since when do we do inter-hospital transfers on a priority 1? That's for active codes, not taxis. The patient is critical. 7 Adam 16. Dr.Silas at Blackwood is insisting. Time is tissue. Proceed to Blackwood Memorial. Coordinates sent to your GPS. The finality in the dispatcher's tone was a steel door, slamming shut. The order was final. Maya glanced at Leo, a flicker of unease in her eyes before her professional mask slid back into place. Copy that, dispatch. En route to Blackwood Memorial. Blackwood Memorial. The name was a ghost story whispered by seasoned EMTs over bad coffee. An old, privately funded research hospital tucked away in the deep woods, known for its radical and often controversial experimental treatments. The kind of place where wealthy, desperate patients went when every other door had slammed shut. It had a reputation, a bad one, shrouded in rumors of patients who checked in but never quite checked out. But it was all hearsay, the kind of thing you laughed off in the daylight. Leo typed the address into the GPS. The screen flickered, dimmed, then brightened again, plotting a course down a long, winding road that seemed to lead into a pocket of absolute darkness. This feels wrong, Maya. My gut is screaming. It's a job, Leo, she said, her eyes fixed on the road. We pick up, we transport, simple in and out. But nothing was ever simple when Blackwood was involved. The forest swallowed the road whole, the ancient pines pressing in like a silent, judgmental audience. Their headlights carved a feeble tunnel through the oppressive dark. The rain now a steady, drumming insistence on the roof. After 20 minutes of navigating serpentine turns that felt increasingly unnatural, the GPS announced in its bland, digital voice, "You have arrived at your destination." But there was nothing there except a solid wall of trees and impenetrable shadow. Terrific, Leo muttered, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. The place is a myth. We're lost. Wait, Maya said, squinting through the downpour. She slowed the ambulance to a crawl. There. A narrow, almost hidden service road branched off to the left, swallowed by overgrowth and marked only by a rusted, tilting sign that read, Blackwood Memorial, authorized. Personnel only. It looked less like an entrance, and more like a trap. They turned onto it, the ambulance jostling violently on the broken asphalt, the suspension groaning in protest. The woods grew denser, the gnarled branches scraping against the vehicle like skeletal fingers trying to gain purchase. And then they saw it. Blackwood Memorial wasn't so much a hospital as a fortress of despair, a monument to forgotten suffering, a hulking Gothic structure of dark, weeping brick and grimy, sightless windows, crowned with crooked spires that clawed at the low-hanging clouds. No light shone from within save for a single, flickering bulb above a massive, oaken-arched doorway. The entire place seemed to be rotting from the inside out, exhaling a chill that seeped through the ambulance's metal skin. They pulled up to the entrance, the ambulance's headlights illuminating the figure of a man standing perfectly still in the rain, as if he were part of the architecture. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in an immaculate white lab coat that seemed to glow with an unnatural whiteness in the gloom. He didn't flinch as they approached, his hands clasped neatly in front of him. "I am Dr. Silas," he said, his voice a dry, rustling sound, like pages turning in a long-closed book. There was no warmth in his pale eyes, only a cold, analytical curiosity that made Leo feel like a specimen. The patient is prepped. Follow me, quickly, we have little time. He led them through cavernous, silent hallways that echoed with their every footstep. The air inside was frigid and carried a strange, cloying odor underneath the aggressive smell of bleach, like rotting flowers, and something coppery, like old blood. The walls were a grimy, peeling green, and the lighting was a series of dim, buzzing bulbs that cast long, dancing shadows. They didn't pass a single nurse, another patient, or any sign of life. Yet Leo had the persistent, crawling sensation that they were being watched from the dark, empty doorways they passed. The room they entered was a surgical suite, but it looked like it belonged in a museum of medical nightmares. The equipment was outdated, heavy chrome and polished steel, but it was spotless, gleaming under the harsh overhead light. On a gurney in the center lay their patient, a young woman with pale, almost translucent skin. She was unconscious, an endotracheal tube taped to her mouth, connected to a whirring ventilator that seemed too loud in the silence. An IV drip was connected to her arm. Her chart, clipped to the foot of the gurney, simply read, Jane Doe. What's her story? Leo asked, starting his assessment. Her vitals, according to the monitors, were stable but fragile, a heartbeat fluttering like a captured bird. A unique and volatile neurological condition, Dr. Silas said, his gaze fixed on the woman with an intensity that felt possessive. We have stabilized her for now, but she requires the specialized ICU at County General. Her bioelectrical impulses are highly unstable. You must be cautious. Any stress could be catastrophic. Maya was all business, already preparing their portable gurney for transport. We'll take good care of her, Doctor. You have our word. As they carefully transferred the limp woman to their own gurney, Leo's fingers brushed against her wrist. It was ice cold. Taped to the inside, almost hidden against her pale skin, was a small, crumpled piece of paper, covered in a frantic, handwritten scrawl. He subtly peeled it off, his heart thudding, and slipped it into his pants pocket as Dr. Silas turned to sign a release form. The journey, back through the labyrinthine halls, felt infinitely longer and more disorienting. Leo could have sworn the corridors they passed through now were different from the ones they came in by, the angles all wrong. He felt a pricking on the back of his neck, the unmistakable sensation of being watched, and he quickened his pace, the wheels of the gurney squeaking a frantic rhythm on the linoleum. They loaded the patient into the back of the ambulance. Dr. Silas stood at the doors, his figure framed by the dark, yawning entrance of the hospital. The rain had stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Do not stop for any reason, he said, his voice low and intense, humming with a strange energy. Do not deviate. Her life depends on the continuity of care. The environment reacts to disruption. Then the heavy doors slammed shut, sealing them in with a sound of finality. Maya got behind the wheel as Leo climbed into the back with the patient. The ambulance pulled away, and Blackwood Memorial vanished into the rearview mirror, swallowed by the night as if it had never been there at all. As soon as they were moving, the tires humming on the asphalt, Leo pulled the note from his pocket. He unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was frantic, scrawled in what looked like charcoal or smudged eyeliner. They're not healing us. They're emptying us. My soul is a battery. Don't let me sleep. If I sleep, he wins. A cold dread, colder than the hospital's air, seeped into Leo's bones. He looked at the patient, Jane Doe. Her eyelids were fluttering rapidly beneath their blue-veined lids, as if she were in the throes of a profound nightmare. The heart monitor began to beep a little faster, the rhythm becoming slightly irregular. Hey, it's okay, Leo said, forcing his voice to be calm as he placed a reassuring hand on her arm. Her skin was still deathly cold. You're safe now. We're taking you to county. Everything's going to be fine. Her eyes snapped open. They weren't the glassy, unfocused eyes of a sedated person. They were wide, terrified, and utterly lucid. A deep, intelligent horror shone from within. She tried to speak around the breathing tube, producing only choked, wet, gurgling sounds. She frantically tapped her own chest with a finger. You want me to suction you? Leo asked, reaching for the catheter. Clear your airway? She shook her head violently, her eyes pleading, desperate for him to understand. She tapped her chest again, over her heart, then pointed a trembling finger directly at the glowing green screen of the heart monitor. That's when Leo saw it, the detail that broke the world. The visual rhythm on the monitor was perfectly steady, a textbook sinus rhythm. the peaks and valleys scrolling smoothly across the screen. But the sound of the beeps, they were stuttering, lagging a fraction of a second behind the visual peaks. It was a tiny, impossible disconnect, a glitch in reality itself. The machine was showing one thing but announcing another. A sudden, massive jolt rocked the ambulance as if they'd driven over a body. It was followed by a loud, heavy thump from the roof, like a sack of meat being dropped onto the metal. Maya's voice came over the intercom, tight with a fear Leo had never heard from her before. "Leo, everything okay back there? Felt like we hit something. A deer, maybe?" Before he could answer, the patient grabbed his wrist with a strength that was shocking for her condition. Her nails dug into his skin. Her mouth was moving, straining against the tape and plastic, trying to form words around the tube. He leaned closer, his ear almost to her lips. She mouthed a single silent word, her breath a ghost against his cheek. "Stop." "Him." The ambulance swerved violently. Maya cursed over the intercom. "Leo, we've got a problem!" The GPS is gone. The dash screens are glitching, showing static. And this fog, it came out of nowhere. I can't see a damn thing out there. It's like driving through soup. Leo looked out the small rear window. The familiar forest outside was gone. Instead, a thick, unnatural fog had descended, glowing with a faint, sickly green luminescence, swallowing the world whole. The ambulance swerved again, tires skidding on a road that no longer felt solid. And then, the patient's monitor emitted a long, flat tone. A continuous, ear-splitting screech filled the compartment. The green line had gone flat, but the woman was still awake, her body rigid, her eyes wide with terror, staring not at Leo but at the ceiling of the ambulance. She wasn't in cardiac arrest, she was conscious. The machine was lying. Then the flat line on the monitor began to change. The green line twitched, spasmed, then started to form a pattern. Not a heartbeat. It was shaping into letters, sharp and angular, as if an invisible hand were drawing them. "Silas." The patient let out a muffled, strangled scream against the tube, her body arching off the gurney in a violent contortion. The interior lights of the ambulance flickered, died, and plunged them into a darkness broken only by the ghostly, pulsating glow of the fog outside and the malevolent, glowing green letters on the monitor, branding the name into the dark. The ambulance slammed to a sudden jarring halt, throwing Leo hard against the wall. The engine coughed and died. The sudden silence that fell over them was deep and absolute, a physical weight pressing down on their eardrums. The only sound was the woman's ragged, panicked breathing and the frantic rustle of her sheets.
"Maya!"
Leo yelled, his voice cracking with terror. He scrambled to his feet. "Maya, you okay?" No answer, just the oppressive, hungry silence. He fumbled for the door handle, his hands slick with sweat, his heart hammering a wild rhythm against his ribs. He pushed the doors open and stumbled out into the fog. It was bitterly cold and damp, clinging to his skin and clothes like a shroud. He couldn't see more than 2 feet in any direction. The world had been erased. "Maya, where are you?" He staggered to the front of the ambulance, his boots slipping on the unseen ground. The driver's side door was hanging open. The seat was empty. The keys were gone. Maya was gone. The radio on the dash was crackling with a low, guttural static, and through it, he could just make out a faint, familiar rustling voice, twisted and distorted. "The vessel must not be lost. The charge is almost complete." Terror, pure and primal, seized him. He turned to run back to the patient, but the fog swirled and a tall, gaunt figure materialized just a few yards away, as if coalescing from the mist itself. Dr.Silas. He wasn't holding a scalpel or a weapon. He was holding a small ornate box made of dark, polished wood inlaid with strange, silvery symbols. A single pulsating red light glowed from its center like a malevolent eye. "You should not have read the note," Dr. Silas said, his voice no longer dry but humming with a powerful, static energy that vibrated in Leo's teeth. "You have introduced a variable. She is not a patient. She is a container, a crucible, and the psychic energy inside her, the pure terror we have cultivated, is too valuable to waste on a meaningless, conscious life." "What did you do to Maya?" Leo screamed into the void, his voice swallowed by the fog. "The forest protects its own," Silas said, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. The fog seemed to part for him. "This place, it has always fed on potent emotion. Fear is the most nourishing. The hospital was built not to treat, but to harvest. We find those on the brink. We isolate them, and we amplify their deepest fears until their very souls become a concentrated fuel. She is almost full. The extraction must be clean. Leo backed away, tripping over the ambulance's bumper. He scrambled into the back, his breath coming in ragged gasps, and slammed the door shut, throwing the manual lock. It felt futile, like locking a paper door against a hurricane. He was trapped in a metal coffin with a terrified woman and a monster outside. He turned to her. Her eyes were locked on him, filled with a profound, bottomless sadness. The monitor was still spelling out Silas's name. Then, the letters dissolved back into a flat line before spiking again, forming new words. A desperate digital plea, H-E-L-P-M-E. A loud metallic crunch landed on the roof of the ambulance, denting the metal inward. Then another. And another. It was the sound of heavy, wet footsteps circling above them, slow and deliberate. Leo looked at the woman, at the pure, unadulterated terror in her eyes, and he finally understood. The note, "Don't let me sleep." Sleep, unconsciousness, was the final surrender. It was the state in which Silas could extract whatever he had been cultivating inside her. Hope was the antidote. Consciousness was the weapon. He grabbed her shoulders, ignoring the pounding from above. "Fight it! Do you hear me? Fight him! You are not a battery. You are a person. Your name is Jane Doe, and you are alive." A sharp metallic screech tore through the ambulance. The sound of claws or tools trying to peel back the roof like a tin can. The woman's eyes began to roll back into her head, her body slumping. The flat line on the monitor began to pulse rhythmically, faster and faster, building towards a horrific climax, a digital countdown to her soul's annihilation. Leo did the only thing he could think of. He leaned close to her ear, ignoring the terrifying sounds of the roof being torn apart, and started talking. He talked about his life, about his childhood dog, about his failed attempt at art school, about the first time he'd saved a life, about the simple joy of a hot meal after a long shift. He poured every ounce of humanity, every happy, mundane, and loving memory he possessed into her ear. He was fighting a sophisticated terror with the only weapon he had, the simple, defiant power of a human story. The pounding on the roof intensified, becoming a frenzy. The doors began to buckle inward, the metal groaning. But the woman's eyes flickered. They focused on him. A single lucid tear rolled down her cheek and soaked into the pillow. The pulsing, frantic flat line on the monitor slowed its rhythm, the peaks becoming less violent, the gaps between them growing longer. The ambulance doors were torn from their hinges with a deafening, final shriek of rending metal. Dr. Silas stood there, but he was no longer just a man. His form seemed to flicker and warp, surrounded by a crackling dark energy that drank the light. The fog and the forest behind him were gone. Instead, there was a void, a swirling mass of shadows from which faint, screaming faces momentarily emerged before being dragged back into the chaos. "It is time for the harvest," Silas hissed, his voice a chorus of whispers. He raised the wooden box, and the red light glowed blindingly bright. But Leo stood his ground, placing himself squarely between Silas and the patient, shielding her with his own body. "You can't have her," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "You feed on fear. Well, I'm not afraid of you anymore." And in that moment, it was true. He felt only a fierce, protective rage. A faint, beautiful sound reached his ears, cutting through the static and the whispers. A siren, distant but getting closer. County General must have noticed they'd vanished off the grid, their transponder going dark. Help was coming. The flickering form of Dr. Silas wavered, the dark energy around him sputtering. The void behind him seemed to shrink, the screaming faces fading. The illusion, the pocket of nightmare, was breaking, unable to withstand the intrusion of the real world. "This is not over," Silas snarled, his form beginning to dissolve back into the mist. The forest is always hungry. There are other vessels, other batteries. And then he was gone. The fog vanished instantly, as if it had never been. The ambulance was parked neatly on the shoulder of the main road, just a mile from the County General turnoff. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in soft, hopeful pinks and oranges. Birds were chirping. Leo turned back to the patient. The frantic energy was gone from her body. She was breathing calmly, evenly on her own. The heart monitor showed a normal, healthy, steady rhythm. And this time, the reassuring beep was beautifully in sync with the blip on the screen. The search team found them 5 minutes later. Maya was with them, disoriented but unharmed. She had no memory of what happened, only that she'd blacked out for a moment after, a wave of dizziness, and found herself wandering, confused, on the road 100 yards behind the ambulance. At County General, Jane Doe made a full and inexplicably rapid recovery. All tests came back normal. There was no sign of any neurological condition. When she awoke, she remembered nothing of Blackwood Memorial, only a vague, fading dream of being lost in the dark. The official report cited a combination of a rare GPS malfunction, a minor carbon monoxide leak in the ambulance, and extreme fatigue as the cause of a shared, vivid hallucination. It was a tidy, logical explanation, the kind people can sleep at night with, but Leo knew. He still works the night shift, because the night needs good people. But he and Maya never take a call that leads to Blackwood County. They've made a pact. And sometimes, when the rain is just right and the night is profoundly still, he'll see a flicker of green on a monitor out of the corner of his eye, or catch a faint, sweet smell of rotting flowers on the wind from a passing car. He'll look out into the dark, past the city lights, and he'll remember the weight of that small, crumpled note in his hand. He knows the truth. The forest is always hungry, and some hospitals don't heal. They feed, and the feeding, he fears, never really stops.